following lecture was produced by Glorian Publishing, a nonprofit organization, and is one of hundreds of lectures freely available via download, podcasts, streaming radio, and transcription. These lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. We invite you to browse our library of lectures, books, courses, and articles to find teachings that suit you. Through the support of donations, Glorian Publishing has published 40 books, hosts international retreats several times a year, offers free online courses, and many other valuable resources, available to anyone worldwide. All of this has been made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. Your donations make it possible for this free public service to reach thousands of people every day. To make a tax-deductible donation in any amount, even anonymously, visit GnosticTeachings.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy.
Meditation today, we performed an exercise that perhaps you found was difficult, in which we investigated in our memories our qualities, our own tendencies, our habits, the ways thoughts and feelings and impulses emerge in us and provoke a response. And when the instructions for the meditation were given, we said that this was a difficult exercise to do. The purpose of the exercise is to start to put together an inventory, a factual overview of ourselves. Not the way we think we are, or the way that we believe that we are, but the facts about our mind, about our experience of life, about how we think and how we feel, and the impulses that we feel that provoke us to act. This objective, factual inventory is absolutely priceless because it reveals to us why we suffer. And it also reveals to us how to change. To give us some clues to help us develop this inventory, today's lecture will be about the purpose of life. All human beings, all creatures, without any exception, need purpose. And all of us crave to know our purpose, why we are alive. What is the point? What are we supposed to do? And the urgency that we feel, particularly when we're young, can be overwhelming, even deeply painful. The urge to know our reason for being. And sadly, our society does not help us to answer that question accurately. Instead, we are told we should imitate others. We should become a doctor or a lawyer and get rich. And only then will we be happy. And if you know any doctors or lawyers, you know this isn't true. And if you know any rich people, you know this isn't true. Many people turn to tradition to find the answer to this question. They turn to religion, or they turn to great philosophers to try to answer the question of why are we here? Why are we alive? What is the purpose? And there is an answer to the question. And I'm hoping that with today's discussion, you will find the way to answer it. The purpose of life in Hinduism is explained through what's called Purushartha. Before we explain what this word means, we need to remember that Hinduism is one of the oldest religions in the world. And it is the root of Buddhism. All of Buddhism is just an expansion of Hinduism. And to understand Buddhism, you must understand Hinduism. But we go deeper. In this tradition, we know that all religions have a common root. And that to understand any religion, we need to go to that common root. And we call that root gnosis, which is a Greek word. And it means directly knowledge, but it doesn't mean theoretical knowledge or knowledge that we've been told or knowledge that we've heard. Instead, gnosis means knowledge that we have acquired through experience. Truth. Reality. No matter where you were born in the world, you have gnosis through your own experience of certain things. For instance, you know that to stay alive, you need food and water and air. You need certain things to sustain life at a bare minimum. And that is a kind of gnosis. You don't have to think about it. It just is. That fundamental truth can be had of anything. And all religions are derived from it, ultimately, because all religions originally were given from the experience of sages and saints and prophets and masters who were teaching from their own experience what we need to do to have the same experience that they had. And that's all that gnosis as a tradition tries to convey to us. What can we do to have gnosis of divinity, of God, of heaven? And we study that beyond in this image that we call the tree of life, which is the basis of Kabbalah, which is known in the West. It symbolizes the same reality that is represented in Hinduism and in Buddhism in other ways, with other terms, but the same truth. In Hinduism, the purpose of life is defined in the old scriptures, in the Vedas, as Purusharthas. So this word Purushartha is really important in Hinduism. And you can define it and interpret it in a variety of ways. Nowadays, people call it the desires of life. That's not what the word actually means in its root objective meaning. Because Purusha means supreme being, supreme self. That's its ultimate meaning. Divinity. But that word Purusha is like saying person or being. It can apply to many levels in life. Purusha can mean soul or spirit. It can mean human being, a person, or a people. It has many levels of interpretation, many potential meanings. But the ultimate meaning is the inner self, the supreme self, divinity or God, Purusha. And the second part of that word is artha, And it literally means meaning. So you can say Purushartha is the meaning of being, but the meaning of the supreme being, the meaning of God, the meaning of divinity, the meaning of Atman or Brahma or Christ or Krishna or any divinity that you want to name there. Purushartha is about the meaning of that. All the Christians talk about Christ, but the meaning, the purpose of Christ is Purushartha. When you look at this word in this way, you can understand that each being at each level of life, mapped on this image of the tree of life, is going to experience and discover purpose, reason for being at their level. All living things have importance and purpose. They're all part of the machinery of nature, the beautiful, sophisticated, elaborate structure of nature. And they all fulfill a purpose and a role at their level. We think that we are more important than bees and butterflies and fish and animals and plants, but we are not. In terms of nature, we are part of the same machine. We are also mechanical beings in nature performing a function that we're not really aware of. From a purely mechanical level, our physical bodies are just transformers of energy that sustain life on this planet. We consume and destroy and release matter. We convert matter to energy, just like the plants do, just like the animals do, just like the minerals do. So as a physical organism, we have a purpose in nature, and that's all that is. Human beings are born, grow up, they consume matter, they transform matter back into energy, and it sustains nature, and then they die. And that's it. As far as nature is concerned, that's our role. Nature doesn't care about anything beyond that for us. Our ideas about art and God and divinity are completely meaningless in terms of nature. Nature only cares about the balance of nature itself. But within that structure, all creatures have artha, meaning and purpose in terms of nature. But that's not related to divinity. That's different. Physically, our purpose in nature is just to transform energy. But psychologically, spiritually, we also have a purpose, but none of us know what it is. We are ignorant of that. We may believe in a religious purpose, or a political purpose, or a creative purpose. We may believe that our purpose is to be a parent, or to be an artist, or to be a business person. But that doesn't mean that is our true purpose. Because you see, when you look at Purushartha in its ultimate meaning, it is the meaning of being or self as divinity, which implies that we, having divinity within us, have a divine purpose. But we don't know what it is. And often, our interest in religion and meditation and spirituality is the urgency to answer that question. What is our purpose? Hinduism divides Purushartha into four: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And any Hindu on the street can answer this for you. They know these things. They learn these things when they're young. But all the Westerners who are interested in yoga and Tantra, they have no idea about this. So we want to explain it so that you understand. The four Purusharthas. Some say the four desires. Some say the four aims or the four meanings. Really, Purushartha is a very deep subject. And to really understand it, you have to reflect very deeply on your life and on yourself. To begin, we'll define these words for you so you can understand what they mean. The first one here is dharma. Commonly on the street, by the average person, dharma is interpreted to mean righteousness or morality. And naturally, when you go from place to place and from group to group and religion to religion, morality changes. What certain people find moral, others find immoral. In certain religions, they teach their children that it is okay for you to kill people of other religions. Whereas in other religions, it is taught that you shouldn't kill anyone. And in other cultures, it is taught you can kill whoever you want. In fact, it's fun. Here's some games you can play about killing people. So morality is subjective. Morality is cultural. Morality changes. Morality is not dharma. So the common interpretation that people have of dharma as morality is mistaken. It is not. Dharma is much, much deeper. We're going to talk more in detail about each of these terms in a moment. But first, I want to give you the idea of these four. The common person says dharma is morality. They say artha is wealth. They say that the purpose of being alive is first dharma, to follow the morals of your culture. And the second is artha, to acquire wealth, to have success, to have the marriage and the house and the children, to have the ideal life according to that culture. And they say that the third, kama, is to have enjoyment. That's the purpose of life for them, to fulfill one's desires. And naturally included in that is sex. And the fourth is moksha, or liberation, or to go to heaven. So in any culture in the world, the followers of the different spiritual and religious traditions believe in these purusharthas, even if they don't call it that. Because all the followers of all the different religions follow their morality, and they believe if they do what the church or the temple or the synagogue tells them, then God will give them the wealth that they want and the situation in life that they want. They will have the prosperity that they want. And that God will give them a certain amount of enjoyment or desire and let them have sex with their husband or wife. And in the end, they will go to heaven. And that's it. Problem solved, end of story. That's all they have to do. This is the way common people wrongly interpret these terms. This perspective is shared by people all over the world and is a very powerful current in society, which says if you just follow the current, if you just go along with all of us, in the end, you're going to go to heaven anyway. So you might as well just enjoy yourself. This is what the religious people think. I'm not talking about people who are not religious. They have a whole other set of problems. We're talking about the common perspective amongst religious and spiritual people. This is deeply mistaken, and it is a very superficial interpretation of these words. So we're going to go into the real meanings. We're going to analyze what these terms actually mean and what they actually tell us. Dharma. This is the first and most important of the Purusharthas. The ultimate meaning of dharma is that which upholds, that which supports, even that which raises. So you can also interpret it as law, statute, virtue, devotion, good works, religion, righteousness, etc. Dharma in synthesis means to do good action, to know what that action is and to do it. So it is to be a righteous person, what in Judaism is called tzaddik, someone who is righteous, someone who is upright, who acts rightly. And in Buddhism, this is someone who uses right effort, right action, to act properly, to do what is good, to not create suffering, to instead act in a way that brings happiness to others and to oneself. Dharma, in this sense, has a very rich usage in Asian cultures. And so it's very difficult to pin down a simple definition for it. Because we can say, when you perform a good action, you will acquire dharma. You will get dharma for that. That means the results of your good action. So if you behave right, that's dharma. And the consequences of that right action are also dharma. And the teaching that explains that is also dharma. So you see, it's a very rich word, very multifaceted. In Hinduism, it is said, Satyam vada dharmam chara, which means speak the truth, do what is right. This is a very profound statement. And we talk about it in Gnosticism as being one of the commandments, but not written in the Bible. It's related with the 11th arcanum. Satyam vada dharmam chara. Speak the truth, do what is right. So we can synthesize that as do your duty. Now, this raises the question, do you know what your duty is? Most people don't. Most people inherit this idea of morality and purpose from parents and school and religion that just follow those wrong interpretations of dharma. That if you just go along with the flow of society, you get your education, you get married, you have kids, you follow your religion, you die, you go to heaven. That is not to do your duty. That is to be a pasture animal, like a sheep or a cow, to just go with the herd wherever the herd is going. Even though the herd is going into the slaughterhouse, you just go along because that's what all the other animals are doing. So sure, that's the duty of an animal headed to slaughter. But that is not the duty of a human being. The duty of a human being is towards oneself and towards others and towards divinity. And to know what that duty is a very deeply individual thing. You cannot write it out in a maxim. It has to be something that you know as gnosis, something you know in experience for yourself. Jesus taught Dharma in this beautiful passage. You shall love the Kyrios your Theos with all of your cardias and with all of your psyche and with all of your dianoia and with all of your ichis. That's Dharma. That, he said, is the greatest commandment. Of course, in English, people say, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind and with all of your strength. That's the common English translation. But as we explained in the previous lecture about finding your master, those Greek words have very deep implications. Nevertheless, this is the first commandment, and it is a beautiful expression of Dharma, to love the master, your God, who is inside of you. To devote yourself entirely towards divinity is the ultimate principle of Dharma. to find your true Purusha, yourself, your innermost, your being. And what was the second? Immediately after he said, and the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, to love the divinity in others in the same way you love your own divinity. To see past the faults of others and to understand them. To not be critical of others. To not see others as enemies or as competitors, but as reflections of divinity. And we don't do that. We see ourselves and others with a very animal mind. We see others as threats and as less than us or worse than us. We don't see other people and see divinity in them. We don't see divinity in ourselves, and we don't see divinity in others. But those are the greatest commandments and the greatest reflections of Dharma. To see divinity in all things and to always be aware of divinity in yourself and always be aware of divinity in others. And with that attitude, you begin to practice this. You shall love the Kyrios, your Theos, with all of your kardias. Everything you have. That is Dharma. This is not a theory. It's something that has to be engaged in us in a continual way using the consciousness with a profound awareness, an awareness of ourselves and awareness of others. Very consistent and powerful awareness. So that is real Dharma. And from that, when you're aware of divinity in yourself, and you know divinity is here and now in you, and aware of you and part of you, you can't be proud or lustful or angry or envious because you're seeing and sensing divinity. Those qualities can't be in the same space. As soon as you allow a desire, an ego, a defect to enter into your mind, divinity leaves. They cannot mix. That which is pure cannot be mixed with that which is impure, because if it mixes, it is no longer pure. Divinity is always pure. And to feel the presence of divinity in us, we must become pure. If you read these descriptions and you study what Dharma is, it isn't about how you appear to be. You may appear to be kind, patient, generous. But no one can see what's really in your heart and mind except you and God. Real Dharma is how you are in your mind, not how you appear to be to yourself or others. You see, what really counts, what really means something, is not how you treat others externally or physically, visibly, but how you treat them in your mind. That's what really matters. How you treat and deal with others invisibly, psychologically. Because God sees that. Divinity sees that. That is what is the measure of a person, the contents of the mind. And that's why we did that inventory today, for us to start studying that and being honest about it. Honestly looking, what is the content, the character of my psychology? Not the way we tell ourselves that we are, but the way that we actually are. The second Purushartha is Artha. And that means meaning. But it also can mean desire, wish, aim, profit, wealth, motive, reason, cause. And of course, the average person reads that list of definitions and immediately picks desire as the best one. Because everyone wants to fulfill their desires. And everyone wants God to agree with their desires. and fulfill them. That's why our prayers are all about, give me this, give me that. But artha really means meaning. So if the first purushartha, or purpose of life, is dharma, to become truly good, the second is to find real meaning, real purpose. We don't find real purpose by fulfilling desires, even though that's what humanity and society believes. A desire, a craving, can never, ever be satisfied. This is one of the oldest passages of any scripture in the world, in the Laws of Manu. It says, a desire cannot be satisfied just as surely as a fire cannot be extinguished by continually giving it fuel. A desire is like the fire. The more you feed it, the bigger it gets. That is the nature of desire. It is a constant appetite, a hunger that can never be sated. And that is why all the religions say you must conquer desire, eliminate desire, overcome desire, become free of desire. But the curious thing is, the second purpose, the second purushartha, is kama, or the third one is kama, which means desire. Artha can mean desire. And so this is how people get confused. Artha truly means purpose. If we think that our real purpose of being alive is simply to accumulate wealth, that is very sad, because you're going to lose all of it when you die, or when the government takes it, whichever comes first. Someone will take it, because when you die, you can't. You lose it. And this is one of the saddest misconceptions that people have. We have no knowledge of what lies beyond the doorway of death. And because of that ignorance, we think mistakenly, well, before I die, I better acquire as much as I can, accumulate as much as I can. And they find or believe that there's some meaning to that. But there isn't. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are, it doesn't extend your life or your happiness. Recently, a very wealthy and very well-known man died of cancer. His wealth, his fame did not extend his life. It did not deepen his happiness. He lost everything. And he spent his whole life building fame and wealth only to lose it. What a waste. How is there purpose in that if you're just going to lose it all and gain nothing by it, ultimately? And that's why Jesus in the gospel said to not lay up treasures on earth, but instead to lay them up in heaven. Because that's the deeper meaning of artha. When you take the first purushartha seriously, dharma, and you act rightly, you act properly for yourself and for others, you act out of love and out of generosity. You do good actions, meaning you are truly ethical, not just moral, but ethical, meaning you do right things. You are honest, sincere, generous, patient. You acquire artha from that. You acquire dharma. You acquire wealth, profit from your good actions. It may not be financial wealth, but you acquire the goodwill of others, the love of others, the respect of others, the gratitude of others, the admiration of others, the protection of others. Aren't those things more valuable than dollars in the bank? Isn't that ultimately what we really want? To be loved cared for, appreciated, valued. Money doesn't give you that. Money makes you hated and envied, gossiped about. But when you do right, you earn respect. That is real artha. Moreover, when you do right, you gain wealth in heaven. In other words, you gain dharma, the positive outcome of those actions. And that is real wealth. That is an accumulation of capital, but not physically. In Christianity, we find Jesus taught about this. He said, "Take no thought saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For after all these things do the ethnos seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of all these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of Theos and his dikaiosine, and all these things shall be added unto you." It says in English, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." But this word righteousness is English. And in Greek, it says dikaiosine. When you read the definition of dikaiosine, it means the condition acceptable to God, the doctrine concerning the way in which man may attain a state approved of by God. It means integrity, virtue, purity of life, rightness, correctness of thinking, feeling, and acting. That's dharma, but named in Greek. Jesus was teaching dharma. What Jesus is explaining in this passage is that if you first seek the kingdom of Theos, which is within you, divinity, and that righteousness, which is dharma, then all of the things that you need terrestrially and otherwise will be the natural outcome of that. It's a simple equation. Don't go chasing after material things. First, seek divinity first. And when you do what is right, divinity gives you what you need. But when you don't seek divinity and you just chase after pleasures and after comforts and after security, you just wind up suffering. The third Purushartha is Kama. This painting depicts the divinity called Kama, or Kamadeva. Kama has a bow and arrow, and the bow is made of flowers, the arrow is made of flowers, and the string is made of bees. So what do you think of when you think of the birds and the bees? Obviously, this is a sexual symbol. In Hinduism, Kama is the god of love, the god of desire. And you see, this is the exact same symbol as Cupid, Eros, which is where we get the word erotic. Eros represents Christ. It was only later that Eros degenerated into something impure, which we explained in a previous lecture. Kama has the same significance, levels of meaning, because kama, sex, can be pure or impure. And that's why in the Bible, in Genesis, Moses described it as a tree of knowledge, of goodness, and impurity. That knowledge, da'at in Hebrew, is dual. Sexuality is dual. It can create, it can destroy. And that's the role of Eros, Kama, and is also the role here of Purushartha related with Kama. Most common people, when they talk about the Purusharthas or the goals or purposes of life, talk about Kama as worldly enjoyment, pleasure, the fulfillment of desires. The previous Purushartha is about the accumulation of wealth and materialism, where Kama is about the fulfillment of the desires for sensations. Artha and Kama have positive and negative implications. Obviously, someone who just wants to get rich wants that money and wealth so they can indulge their senses. so they can have all the finest things and eat the finest foods and surround themselves with all the pleasures of the world. So they want artha and kama to feed their desires. But if our interests are truly upright, then our interest in artha and kama will be related with the needs of spirit, the needs of the soul, of the consciousness. So whereas artha or wealth would be about accumulating the results of good actions, accumulating things in heaven, wealth in heaven, things that are superior to physicality. Kama is also that way. It is about acquiring enjoyments, pleasures related with the soul, with the consciousness, not with senses, not with sensual desires, but with the longings of the heart, the longings of the consciousness. And that's the role kama, eros, Christ plays. But this is a very tricky thing, because kama, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, triple is the gate of the hell destructive of the self: kama, wrath, and greed. Therefore, let man renounce these three. This is what Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. 3 ways for you to go to hell: lust, anger, greed. But right here we see kama as the third purushartha, the third reason for being alive. So this appears contradictory. Krishna is saying kama leads you to hell, but the Vedas are saying kama leads you to heaven. How do you resolve the contradiction? Kama has a very rich significance, like dharma and like artha. It can mean desire, but what kind of desire? It can mean impurity, but it can also simply mean imagination or pleasure, wish. It can mean also the entity of semen itself, the creative energy, the sexual force, not just in men, but in women. That is the power of kama. It's in sex. But that power can be used for good or for harm. That is why that tree of knowledge of goodness and impurity. Adam and Eve used the sexual force wrongly and brought about suffering. They were cast out of Eden. Eden in Hebrew means bliss, happiness. So by the misuse of sexual pleasure, they experienced suffering. But with the proper use of sexual pleasure, one can rise out of suffering. That's the dual significance of kama. And that is also in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, who's the Christ of Hinduism, says in the Bhagavad Gita also, I am kama, which is unopposed to dharma. And he says further, kill this powerful enemy, kama, by the observance of brahmacharya. So if you're not well educated in these words, this can sound so full of contradictions. Firstly, he says in there, kama leads you to hell. And then he says, he is kama. And then he says, destroy kama. So the person who's uneducated can become very confused. Krishna is a symbol. He represents the Christic force that descends through the ray of creation and illuminates all the levels of existence. That force is the fire of life itself. It is the energy in all things that makes them alive. It is the radiance of being itself, the force of life. And its true nature is love as sacrifice. And it's symbolized by Jesus, who sacrificed himself so that others may live. That is Christ. Krishna represents that. Where do we find that power in us most acutely, most powerfully, with the most significant influence over us on every level of our being? It is in sex. There's no question it is the most potent and influential force that moves through us. That is Krishna. That is Christ. That force. That's why he says, I am kama, which is unopposed to dharma. He is the force of kama, eros, within us. The problem is we have ego. We have lust. And that is kama inverted. And in Christianity and Judaism, that is Satan, shaitan, the adversary, what is called Lucifer, the bearer of light. That is the light of Christ inverted, flipped, made impure, fallen, descended, trapped. And the Greeks called it Prometheus. It is the God who gave the fire to humanity and was punished by the gods for it. That's Christ. All of those symbols indicate this, how the creative power of God is in our sexual force, in our sexual energy, but because of the condition of our mind, it is inverted. It is dangerous, destructive. Yet it is also the clue that can free us from suffering. And the way to do it is here. Kill this powerful enemy kama by the observance of brahmacharya. That word means sexual continence, sexual purity. It is to learn to use the sexual force for spiritual purposes, not for the fulfillment of sensual pleasure. It's called tantra. It's called alchemy. Sexual transmutation. And that's why the mythology of Krishna is rich with his love, a sexual love for his wife. And that was also in Christianity until the church cut it out. Jesus was also married. Jesus had a wife and loved his wife in the same way Krishna loves his wife. It's sad that the church removed that. But those things all symbolize a fundamental truth about kama. The fourth purushartha is moksha. And this is translated simply as liberation, emancipation, freedom, deliverance, salvation, which is what all religions promise. All religions say, if you follow our religion, you will be saved. From what? From hell, from suffering, from pain. And that's symbolized here by the Bhava Chakra. Some people call it the wheel of samsara. Here you see all the classes of living beings who are recycling continually in transmigration in nature. Driven by the consequences of their previous actions, they constantly repeat. They are born, they live, they repeat the consequences of their former actions, and they add to them by producing more mistaken actions. And because of that, when they die, the cycle has to repeat again and again. Unresolved consequences. So moksha ultimately is about being freed from the cycles of birth and death, becoming liberated from that. But when you study these religions deeply, you understand that you cannot be liberated from a cycle in nature simply because you believe in something. You're liberated from a cycle in nature when you change the causes that produced the cycle. It's that simple. Jesus, and throughout the teachings of his apostles, it is stated repeatedly, no adulterer, no fornicator, no liar, no thief, no murderer can go to heaven. All the religious mythologies show that the way to become free from suffering and from the regions of hell is by destroying what binds you to it. That's the symbol of John the Baptist being beheaded, the symbol of Jesus being crucified, of Peter being crucified, of all the martyrs. Death of the ego. Death of pride. Death of lust. Death of anger. And when those elements are dead and what was trapped in them is freed, the parts of ourselves that are trapped in them are freed. Nothing binds us to hell any longer. We are only caught and bound to hell, to suffering, because of the actions that we ourselves produced. And until those actions, the consequences of them are satisfied and the causes of them are eliminated, that bondage will remain. And that's all hell is for. The hell realms are real, but they are not eternal damnation or eternal punishment. They are just nature's recycling plant. They are how divinity cleans souls who did not clean themselves. And once those souls are cleaned, they are pushed back into the wheel to try again, to try to free themselves, to try to become something more than just an animal, just a slave. There is no eternal damnation or eternal punishment. That was invented by people who wanted to keep their churches full. The suffering of hell is long and painful. It's best to avoid it. And we do so by finding real freedom and liberation now, by changing how we act, how we behave. So these purusharthas are satisfied when we become aptakama in Sanskrit, which means a perfected being. Now, I want to point out something you may have already noticed about this word. Aptakama, which means someone who's perfect, half of that word is kama, which most people interpret as desire or lust. But an aptakama has no lust. They are perfect, like Jesus or Krishna. A perfect being is called aptakama. Kama should not be denigrated or seen as entirely evil. It is not. It is the force of nature that creates. Sex is a part of nature. It is natural. But there are many types of sexuality. And the sexuality that humanity knows is animal, bestial, impure. The humanities that are not trapped in that have a different type of sexuality. Amongst pure beings, there's also sexuality, but not like ours. It's different. Aptakamas have kama perfected. That word can also mean, when you look at the word apta, it can also mean complete or fulfilled. Apta. So to be aptakama means someone who has fulfilled the purpose of life. They have reached it. They have fulfilled it. They have completed it. And you see kama is half of that word. That underscores its significance. So let's look at this again. Here are the four purusharthas: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. And we've described their real meanings. Dharma is to have ethics, purity, uprightness. Artha, to find genuine meaning, our true purpose, our real vocation. Now, about this, every one of us has a purpose. We have what we call a vocation, a role, a purpose, a reason why our divinity needs us to do something. But most of us don't know what that is. But I'm going to tell you how you discover it. It's by knowing yourself. Not by theorizing, not by speculating, not by asking other people. It is by knowing yourself. You discover your true purpose. And when you find that, you find such happiness, a fulfillment, a kind of contentment, and a kind of inspiration that cannot be replaced by anything. Most people try to find purpose and meaning in getting an education or getting a job or getting famous or getting wealthy. But those are, you could say, diversions from their real craving, which is to know their true purpose of being alive. Your artha is the thing that you were born to do. And when you find it, you will do it with such joy and perseverance and energy and enthusiasm. You won't care if it's difficult. You won't care if people hate you for it. You won't care if you're making zero money or making a lot of money. None of that will matter. That's all circumstantial. You only will care to do what you're doing. And we can look to some examples of that. Mozart. Mozart was hearing music and would just write it down. And that was his vocation. His purpose was to give you what he was hearing with so much enthusiasm and energy, and to just make something beautiful for others. Our own artha, our own purpose is like that. It is to do something because we must do it. And you can find a little similarity of it in the way a parent thinks about their child. A parent will immediately, without even thinking about it, always do what's best for the child. Without hesitation. Without thought of me, myself. Whenever there's a decision to be made or something to be done, the parent will just immediately act for the child at whatever cost. And finding your artha is like that. It is a kind of action, a kind of motivation, a kind of movement that just must be done for the benefit of others. Because it just must be done. Kama, the third, is a divine sexuality, a type of purity. And its chief characteristic is genuine love. It also is marked by a genuine beauty, something divine, something inexpressible, something deeply beautiful. That is Kama in the pure form. And that's what the mythology of Krishna is supposed to convey to us. The beauty of a divine sexual love. That is one of the purposes of life, is to find that and experience that. And fourth is moksha, liberation from birth and death. So these are the real meanings of the Purusharthas, the purposes of being alive. All of them are ruled by the first, Dharma. You cannot find meaning, divine sexuality, or liberation without Dharma. It's impossible. Dharma is the foundation. Dharma is everything. And that's why we say, don't focus on finding meaning. Don't focus on finding a marriage. Don't focus on liberation from birth and death as your main focus. Focus on Dharma. Your main focus should be Dharma. And how do we realize that in ourselves? Firstly, we study the teachings. You need to study the teachings deeply. Become very well rounded in Dharma as the teachings. But more importantly is ethics. Your actions, how you behave, how you act. You must study the teachings in order to know how to act. You don't need to worry about the rest, artha, kama, moksha, because those are just the outcomes of Dharma. I know everyone wants to find their meaning, their artha. Everyone wants to find their vocation, their purpose. Yes, of course. And everyone wants to find divine, sexual, a beautiful love, a perfect marriage, a soulmate, they call it. Of course everyone wants that. But when you focus on that, you lose sight of Dharma. When you're focused on your vocation, on your job, for example, or on your life, how you're going to live as a spiritual person in the world, you lose sight of Dharma. Or when you're focused just on moksha, trying to liberate yourself from society and the world, you lose sight of Dharma. Don't. Don't worry about artha, kama, and moksha. Don't worry about meaning, marriage, or liberation, or awakening in other worlds. Don't worry about that. Focus on Dharma. Most important. Every day. Study the doctrine, study yourself. Dharma. Do good actions. Dharma. Everything else comes from that. That's what Jesus said. That's what Krishna said. And that's why in that old scripture, the Laws of Manu, it says, of all of these dharmas, the knowledge of the self is the highest. It is verily the foremost of all sciences, for by it one attains immortality. So I'm not saying anything new. I'm only reminding you of what the most ancient scriptures say. The highest dharma is knowledge of self. That's what we see mapped in this tree of life. A map of self. What do you know of this? Not theoretically, not just being able to recite the terms and meanings. What do you know of it? What gnosis do you have of that chart? What do you know of yourself? How much gnosis do you have of yourself? Everybody wants to awaken in the astral world and travel in the astral world or travel in the mental world. Everybody wants to go and talk to the masters and the angels in the astral plane. But for you to do that, for you to travel in the astral world of the exterior world, you first must know the astral world of yourself. Do you? Are you awakened in your astral world? In yourself? Do you have gnosis of that? If you want to awaken in the internal worlds, you must first awaken in yourself, here and now. If we cannot even be awake in the physical world here and now, we cannot be awake in the internal worlds. Awakening is a state of consciousness here and now, not later. It is now in the moment. That is to be awake. Not later. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. Awake. And if you can sustain that awake observation, conscious, present, expansive, you can start to extend that into the internal worlds. So when I ask, are you awake in the astral world? I'm asking you, when your physical body is asleep and you go out of your physical body, are you awake? Or are you just dreaming? Because if you're dreaming, you're asleep. If you want to awaken in the astral world, awaken. And that begins now, here, in this moment. And for that awakening to deepen and expand, you must know yourself. You must know your mind, your heart, your body. You must know who is it bringing these thoughts, these feelings, these impulses. That is how you gather self-knowledge. That is the highest dharma. If you want to know the internal worlds, the nirvanas, the heavens, the planes, whatever words you want to use, start with knowing yourself. If you have any questions, please ask. Please.
In answer to what you just said, how would one know themselves?
That is exactly the question.
That is the question.
How do you know yourself?
It's a difficult thing, isn't it?
It is to use the consciousness, to become conscious of oneself. That's how it begins, to be aware. When you are aware, then you can acquire experience. If you're unaware, you cannot know. And our problem is we are not aware. We are dreaming. We're dreaming all night and we're dreaming all day. So if you want to know yourself, first you must be aware of yourself and watching. And you also have to study the teachings, because there's a lot to know about that. It sounds simple, and in its essence, it is simple. But because our mind is so complicated, we need a very good education. So we need to study the teachings of the great masters.
And is that studying the great teaching, the teachings of the great masters by reading books?
By reading,
They study.
yeah, studying the teachings by reading books, and not only just reading them, but reflecting on the meaning and putting it into practice. So it's good to read the books, but it doesn't mean anything if we're not practicing. So by study, I mean read what is said there, but then use it. And study the outcome. When you change your behavior, what happens? And that's how you learn. It's not to rush, but to do things very methodically, very carefully, with a lot of awareness. And that's how you start to know yourself. The key, the most important thing, is to use the consciousness all the time. In the moment, being aware, and every day meditating, so that you expand that awareness, deepen it. More questions? Knowledge of self is that word purusha, which can mean all those levels. It can mean the ultimate self, and it can also mean the terrestrial self. So it's all of it. You have to know all of it. Self-knowledge, self-realization, is to know yourself all the way from the bottom to the top. And to really know yourself, you have to begin at the bottom. That's where we are. You have to know where you are now and study who you are now. Because honestly, if I say self-knowledge is about knowing your inner self, so you must study that inner self, how are you going to do it? Can you see your inner self? Can you see Atman? Can you go and talk to your inner divinity and say, hey, I really want to get to know you. Can you tell me this and that? We're not capable. For us, self as divinity is just a theory or a belief. We're not at this level yet where we can go directly and investigate the nature of our true inner divinity, our innermost, because most of us haven't the ability to have that experience. So for us, self-knowledge is to begin with where we are, with what we can perceive, and work to change. And the more we change, the more the consciousness awakens, it develops that capacity so that eventually you are capable of perceiving divinity and talking to divinity, questioning divinity, learning about divinity, knowing divinity, not in belief or theory, but in experience. Well, that comes as a dharma after working. Consciousness is a sense. And like every sense, if you don't use it, it atrophies, it weakens. But as you use it, it strengthens. And the more and more you use it, the stronger it gets, and the greater its range becomes. The consciousness is very mysterious, very simple, and very powerful. It's how we perceive everything. But we think that what we perceive is all that we can perceive, and we're very much mistaken about that. So yeah, the more you work with it, the more it expands and the more capable it becomes. And that's entirely up to you, how far you grow it. The more you're willing to sacrifice and change, the more you can grow it. But the more you want to stay the way you are, the more limited you will be. Sacrificing your desires, sacrificing your bad habits. sacrificing your resentments, sacrificing your suffering, giving up the things that you're attached to psychologically. Many of us are just attached to our suffering. We love how we suffer, and we don't want to change that. Like we have a resentment towards God or a resentment towards others, and we feel entitled to have that resentment, and we don't want to give it up. That's the way we suffer willingly, and we want to suffer like that. And as long as we hold on to that, we will never change. So we have to renounce those psychological things and change them. If you want to become what you are not, first, you must not be what you are. If you want to do that, first you have to know what you are. And we don't know what we are. We don't know ourselves. We have a lot of collections of theories and beliefs about ourselves, things we tell ourselves. Oh, I'm this way and that way, but none of that's true. The sad, shocking reality is that we are the way we are because we made ourselves this way. And we don't want to change. And if you want to be something better, you have to change. And only you can do it. You have to give up the way you are to become something else. And that's scary because we have a lot of attachment and security in this supposed sense of self. But the fact is, it's a collection of lies that we've created and made into a cage that traps us in pain. And so we need the courage to come out of that. Part of the reason that we emphasize meditation so much, and we emphasize the importance of practicing daily, is because if you are serious about meditation, you will start to experience the truth of yourself that is distinct from that cage. It's only when you really start to experience what your true nature is that you understand that the ego is nothing but suffering. But without meditation, you can't have that experience. It's impossible. It's only in meditation that you can experience the consciousness free of the cage. Many traditions study the same material, but they never meditate. And that's why they never change. And they just remain in suffering. Even many students of this tradition, they study the teaching, they memorize the teaching, they know the terms, they go to all the meetings, but they don't meditate. Or if they do, they meditate very superficially. And so they never experience their true nature. That experience is absolutely essential. Because it's what empowers the consciousness to recognize what it is. And that the ego is optional. It isn't necessary. It's a cage, it's bondage, it's a form of suffering. And it's only in that experience that you really get that and become enthusiastic and inspired to change it. So meditation is really important. Part of what that meditation today also teaches us, it teaches us about our psychological song. It's the opera we sing ourselves. Or maybe not opera nowadays, maybe now it's a pop tune. No, maybe for some people it's a rap, but I think for most people it's some kind of pop tune where they are singing in their mind about their suffering. Woe is me. No one understands me. I suffer so much. My mother this, my father that, my husband, my wife, my kids. Woe is me. That psychological song is poison. But we love to drink it. We don't even realize it. So to study that, I recommend you study the book Treatise of Revolutionary Psychology, which explains many of these subjects in great detail.
To learn more about what you learned in this lecture, we invite you to explore the books published by Glorian Publishing, available from booksellers worldwide. You may also be interested in online courses or upcoming retreats, all of which you can learn about at GnosticTeachings.org. All of this has been made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. Will you help others to benefit from this knowledge? Most spiritual schools recommend a donation of $10 to $20 per lecture. Every donation helps. Make a donation now at GnosticTeachings.org. Thank you. May all beings be happy.